My name is Connor Trimble. I'm a surf photographer and videographer based here in Honolulu, Hawaii. We're going to dive into which dome is best for you and talk about the new Canon RF 10-20 f4 lens and what it's good for. The gear I'm using to test these two domes is the Canon R5 with my Aquatech Edge Pro underwater housing. Let's start with, is it good for 50-50 or split shots? And using the 8-inch dome, absolutely 100%. It's amazing for that because this lens is so wide. So there's two main factors that help get great split shots. Number one is having a super wide lens. Check, this lens is super wide. And number two, when your camera's in the water housing, you want the lens to be as far away from the waterline as possible, meaning that you want your camera farther back in the element and from the port. It's gonna give you a much more clear image. The closer your lens is to the waterline, the less pronounced or clear that waterline will be. The setup with the 8-inch dome allows for the lens to be pretty far back and have a clear waterline to show the scene above and below the surface. And the combo of these two factors make it one of the best, if not the best, Canon RF lens for split shots. Something worth noting is that you can use the 6-inch dome for split shots, but the waterline isn't as clear. There will be greater distortion for above and below the water. I don't recommend it for the best quality, but it is doable. Let's talk about if it's good for shooting underwater. The 10-20 is incredible underwater because it's so wide. It allows you to get really close to your subject. And I'll give you a tip here too. The closer you are to your subject underwater, the more clear and crisp your photos will turn out, typically because there's less organisms in the water between you and your subject. I'll use the 8-inch dome if I'm shooting near the surface, just going underwater occasionally. But if I'm going to be diving 15 feet or 3 meters and deeper consistently, then I'll usually use the 6-inch dome. I do this because it's easier with the housing. The more air that's in the housing, especially with the big dome, the more effort you have to put in to get down and you fight that buoyancy of it. So I'd rather exert myself less and have more control of my housing with the 6-inch dome when diving deeper. Is the 10-20 good for empties? The 6-inch dome is perfect for shooting in shore break or even bigger waves. I really put this lens to the test recently here in Hawaii at Sandy's on a hectic shore break day and loved how wide the lens was. The 10mm lens makes you really feel immersed in the barrel, which I love. On top of that, I also tested this lens extensively in the Mentawise to see how it does shooting surfers. So, how is the 10-20 shooting surfers? Whew. I absolutely love shooting with it in the Ments. Getting right up and close to the surfers in the barrel with them is always incredible, although it is pretty challenging to line up. My favorite thing is how close you are to the action with the water drops everywhere, the expression on the surface faces being so clear, and depending on the angle, also showing the landscape and just the whole scene. So I've been hyping up this lens a lot, and after extensive testing in Hawaii, Indo, and Tahiti, I want to give my honest thoughts on the RF 10-20 f4. First off, the ports from Aquatech are perfect for this lens. No crazy vignetting, and it also has an easy zoom gear that allow me full control over the lens. But the lens itself, I'd say, is a little bit more of a photo lens than a video lens. The stabilization wasn't the best compared to the RF 15-35 2.8. You do not notice this while shooting photos at all, but for video factor, it doesn't happen a whole ton, but there is a little bit of like a weird warble with stabilization. There is some distortion and pulling at the edges of the image, especially from 10 to 14 millimeters, but the distortion is much less than any fisheye I've used in the past. Lastly, it is pretty costly compared to the 15-35, plus doesn't let in as much light, being f4 compared to f2.8, which doesn't matter shooting midday around f8, which is how I typically shoot, but I know other photographers prefer that extra shot of light, especially because it's more expensive. For me, the big factor is why you get it is it just being extra wide, and although it is niche, I absolutely love this lens in the water with the port combos from Aquatech, and I cannot recommend it more.